Okay, good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance on Channel 6. My apologies for the late start, and because of Parliament today, we will have to end at 1:30, so my deepest apologies for the first program for the year. I am yours, Gail Teixeira, Opposition Chief Whip, representing the People's Progressive Party Civic, Members of Parliament, and the People's Progressive Party. On this program, we shall focus on matters of public importance, bringing to your attention information and to have discussions on issues and matters that are of concern to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30, right here on Channel 6. We shall invite guests on the program from time to time, as well as introduce members of the Parliament for the People's Progressive Party, and to also let you know and to meet and to get to know the lead sectoral spokespersons on our side at the National Assembly. There are 17 sectoral spokespersons on our side, covering what was the 26 ministers of government. However, as you know, we have a new minister. So we're up to 27 ministers, and of course, you cannot forget the president. So this is a rather overflated, top-heavy government. Well, we ended our last program on the last day of 2015, and I hope that you had a pleasant and happy welcoming in of New Year 2016 with your family, loved ones, and that this new year will be good for you and your families. It will be healthy and safe for you. 2016, of course, will be a challenge, and as I said in the last program, it is going to be a challenge. And just on the eve of the turning into the new year, we have seen some developments which are of concern and matters of public importance. But we mustn't be pessimistic and despondent, nor must we be afraid to speak out and raise our concerns about certain, as I said, very unhealthy and sinister developments we have seen emerging in our nation since the APNU-AFC took over the reins of government. So the new year has started, and wow, is it starting out with all sorts of changes and all sorts of strange happenings. As I said, reshuffle of Parliament, reshuffle of the cabinet, one more minister, one more high salary, and of course, we have had other happenings which we'll come to later in the program, which should concern you, the general public of our country. Remember, we've spoken in previous programs about parliamentary democracy and its erosion in the last Parliament and in this Parliament. We had Bishop Edgell, a former minister with the Ministry of Finance, twice on our program, where we spoke of the disregard and in some cases, like the specialty hospital contract by the government, the abandonment of the procurement laws and financial regulations by the APNU-AFC coalition government. Well, the government has said they will not review their contract with Federloid, despite not just the PPP's call for them to do so and to go back to tender and abide by the financial regulations, but coming from some of their former supporters and NGOs that were hostile to the PPP and government, saying retender for the Surrender Hospital. Deaf ears, they're not listening, they don't want to listen. You know, we talked in one program, I think December the 10th, about Human Rights Day, and we talked about some of the fundamental human rights and human rights and the rule of law forming the basis of a fair and stable democratic society. Well, this government has just disregarded a number of the freedoms under the four basic freedoms I'll talk about. Freedom from fear, F-E-A-R, freedom from want, freedom of speech, and freedom of worship. And so let's take those and let's just go through that again. With the dismissal of over 3,000 employees in the public service, including 1,972 Amerindian community workers, the dismissals including persons from state entities, 10 regional administrations, community development offices, and district development offices, with no cause and no respect for the labor laws, leading to increased hardships for their family. Merely, is it because of their ethnicity, or merely because of their political affiliation, or even in worst cases, suspected political affiliation? And this trend continues. As we came to the end of the year, we saw other people being sent home, losing their jobs, including Mr. Sitar being sent off, and Mr. Brassington. But also a lot of people are also losing their jobs at the lower level, the lower ranks in the public service. And so these are the ones that don't make the news reports, don't make the headlines, but it is impacting on them because many of them are being removed because they are suspected to be, or the government has information that they're People's Progressive Party members or supporters, or that they worked as polling agents and scrutineers in the 2015 elections, and that's their democratic right to do so, regardless of where you work. However, I noticed that the Minister Brooms has been reshuffled to what you call mining, after all the kudos that the government media gave for her outstanding work with Labour and the rights of workers. However, Mrs. Minister Brooms has been rather quiet, extraordinarily quiet, on the issue of all these workers who've lost their jobs. She seems to have had a penchant to be entering businesses and charging in like a knight in shining armor and terrorizing people, in violation of the labor laws, by the way. And yet, well, she's now at mining, so we'll see. And I wonder how she's going to deal with her conflict of interest to do with the fact that she has mining claims in her name. So we'll see. But I see that she's in charge of occupational health and safety in the Ministry of Natural Resources, and Minister Trotman, Raphael Trotman, is the head minister there, head honcho. So that we'll see what happens. She will then be the inspector of occupational health and safety in the mining sector. Let's see how that goes. But the trend continues, and the silence and the refusal of the government to retract, to stop, to reinstall. No, they're not doing it. They're not interested. They are absolutely intransigent. You know, I'm old enough to remember the kind of discrimination that went on in the Burnham era in this country. And I don't believe we've seen any levels of open, direct discrimination and alienation of people based on their ethnicity or political affiliation. We have not seen it in this country since the Burnham era. And so, are times going back full cycle again? However, the immediate impact on the people's lives are playing out. Now, for example, the commercial sector, the economy isn't doing well. People don't have money. The economy is flatlined. And so the fact that you've sent home thousands of people in the public sector, the fact that there are a lot of workers in the private sector who've lost their jobs because of the slowdown of the economy, the fact that people aren't getting contracts, or the extreme slothfulness with which they are tendering and awarding contracts for major works in this country, all of this is leading to a grinding slowing down of the economy, flatlining of it, and of course people's conditions of life, the freedom from want, we are going to see that freedom being undermined more and more. And of course we had the freedom of worship. We talked about that several programs ago, about the very worrying indication and development in relation to the Diwali festival. And so I won't go over that again, except to say that the state has no right in interfering with people's constitutional right to freedom of religion and freedom to worship, and the right to worship their religion as they see fit. And so the Constitution of Guyana protects this and prevents any vilification of any of the religions, because we're a multi-religious society. But it appears with Diwali festival that Minister Ramjatan became the person who felt that he could determine when Diwali would be held, and he's gone ahead and bullheaded announced the date for next year. Oh, well, this year now, 2016, beg pardon. And of course, we focused on developments in Parliament, both in the last Parliament, the 10th Parliament, and the behavior of the government now in this Parliament, with the 33 seats against our 32. Then, of course, when they were in the opposition, their main task was to get rid of the PPP and get it out of office. Now that they're there, the problem is they want to make sure that by the time the next elections come, they will weaken the PPP. Well, let me tell you, they got a shock coming to them. We are showing that we haven't cowed out, we'll continue to struggle, we'll continue to represent the people of this country, and we will continue to do that. But don't make any mistake, we're not unaware of what their objectives are between now and 2020. And of course, freedom of press, freedom of speech. The coalition said that they would ensure that the government media would be balanced and fair, and that when we ran NCN and all these places, it was a party newspaper. Well, Other than some new headlines, the tabloid is looking a little bit different. They've improved that. Good for them. And the front page, etc. The government has made the newspaper less balanced and, of course, has had major changes in sending home staff and, of course, changing the boards of the NCN and the Guyana National Newspapers Limited, full of APNU and AFC people. And so, what has changed? If you're listening to their attack on us, what has changed? And of course, if you listen to us, it is that they have gone far beyond in unabashedly putting their party people in every level of every agency and every facet of Guyanese life. And of course, the ex-military people we have to keep a particular eye out for, as we'll come to later in this program. We also, for example, talked about the continuation of other trends and shared with you several examples and instances in the new parliament. And as we pointed out, that this one seat poses several problems for them because they have to make sure that they are in parliament for every sitting, and we predicted that there wouldn't be many sittings of parliament, and that obviously and we're seeing their legislative agenda is extraordinarily thin, and the fact that they're rushing through things, that we've had a discussion on that in this program. But all of this one seat, a difference of 4,500 odd votes, is thanks to the tampering of the GCOM electoral machinery and the compromising of it to allow for this hairbreadth so-called victory of the government. And as you know, and we keep repeating, we have this election petition before the courts, and we're challenging the integrity of the electoral machinery. And we've talked about, too, the motions that we table in the House, and of course by now you know that our motion to annul Order 16 with regards to the salary increases for the ministers, members of parliament and special officers was defeated in the House, and they voted against it. And of course we have our motion on the election day violence and compensation for the victims, as well as calling on all members of parliament to declare their income tax declarations by December 31st. Of course, that motion has been before the House for almost 2 months, and it still isn't, we haven't still been able to debate it. And it's on the agenda for today in Parliament. However, there are other matters. They've now brought the budgets for the constitutional agencies, 16 of them, and that will push all our items to when? After budget? Next week? Who knows? Because as you may have heard, that every fourth sitting is the day for the opposition. Well, it's called Private Members' Day, and in Parliament, the opposition is called Private Members' Day, private members. So that's every fourth sitting is supposed to be ours. Well, we returned to Parliament in August. Parliament has existed since June the 10th, but let's say the 4 months since we've returned. 4 months without one day for the opposition, not one day. Today is supposed to be our day, and we'll see it's all being packed up and front-loaded with the constitutional amendment, constitutional agency's budget for 2016. And we take note of, and you may have noticed, that the government has now developed a new governance kind of consultation process format where, for example, and we'll just use 2 examples as proof of that, on December 23rd in the afternoon, in the eve of Humanabi, the Minister of Legal Affairs sends out requests to a number of NGOs to attend a meeting on Monday, December 28th, to discuss the 100-odd page anti-terrorism bill. No one had a copy of the bill. It wasn't sent to them. And of course, by the Wednesday before Humanabi, people were hitting the road, it's Christmas, etc. So having done that, and people turned up, but the meeting lasted less than 2 hours, and it was aborted by the minister when the discussions, I believe, became a little bit too inquisitive for him. And then, of course, on December 31st, they sent out a similar thing, but this time with the copies of the letter, of course, electronically sent out, inviting people to come on Monday, January the 4th, to discuss the 2 other bills that they have in Parliament, which we've challenged, the coroners and the law reform. All of these bills should have gone to a parliamentary select committee to allow the time. Of course, anti-terrorism, they voted for it, they passed it, and so that is now the law of the country, and it will be, I assume, that His Excellency the President will assent to all these bills they're rushing through in the last month or so. So this new format of by remote control, telling people, come, NGOs don't operate like that. They need to consult, they need to see the documents, they need to talk. You know, it is not one man running an NGO, at least not the decent NGOs that mean anything in this country. You know, private sector, labor, religious organizations and women's organizations, etc., youth. And also, if you want a participation of the Amerindian communities in National Two Shows Council, you can't do it on a holiday weekend, so they cannot come and they cannot attend, etc. So, but this is going through the form of consultation. They are not interested in real consultation. They just want the framework to say, yes, we consulted. However, we have also seen, as we pointed out, the growing lack of transparency, lack of accountability, the lack of disclosure, and what we know now and hearing about corrupt dealings. We've spoke on several programs about the specialty hospital, city council, cleanup campaign, appointment of foreign advisors overseas, the purchase and retrofitting of vehicles for ministers, and we conjecture this must be for bulletproofing. We don't know. This is not disclosed. And, you know, Budget 2016 will be around the corner, whether it is next week or the week after or whenever it is. The point is that 2016 budget, announced by the Minister of Finance, will be coming early this year, and we welcome that. That gives the country time to be able to execute some of the programs which they did not do in 2015 as required in the budget. But anyway, the point is that in the 2016 budget, we promise you, we're going to ask them the same questions they asked us. When we were in the government and we were going through the budget for Office of the President, every single ministry, they want to know who the contract workers were. What were their names? What were their jobs? What was their salaries? Etc., etc. What were their qualifications? Well, we intend 2016 budget to give them a taste of their own medicine, because all of our salaries were public knowledge, all of them, including me, of course, because I was the target for them. That was all public knowledge. So you need to know, what are the new chaps getting? How many advisors? President Ramata and President Jagdeo had 2 advisors, myself and Mr. Odinga Lumumba. How many advisors do you have now? Do you really know how many advisors there are? In the budget, in August, they announced that there were 5. Do you know how many more they have? 3 or 4 more. So we want to know. We have a right to know. We are the people of Guyana. We have elected them. We elect our parties. And those of you who supported the APNU AFC, I will think that you will be the most vociferous in asking for public disclosure, and because all the rest of us want to know about it too. But you know, the year has turned on some very, as I said, disturbing issues. We are seeing more and more that the state and this government is moving to consolidate more and more power, ruling by dictate and expediency, non-disclosure, as I said earlier, and some strange happenings. You know, I said at an earlier program that APNU, AFC, new clothes, green and yellow, no difference, same old PNC. They can't help themselves. Democracy is a stranger to them. They have a problem with the philosophical and the framework and the beliefs of democracy and the rights of the people. They have no conscience. Well, as I said, the year ended on a sinister note with a terrible car crash at Carafista where 3 people lost their lives. And at first all it said was, you know, big headline, Carafista smash up, 3 dead. And it was sad. It was December 30th that this happened, the same night we had Parliament. It is as the story unravels that it was in fact that this was a special ops by a GDF soldier working with police and supposedly targeting Brassington and his daughter, and then ends up chasing another young woman who is a wife of a member of Parliament and a relative of hers down the street, sandwiching them on Carafesta, trying to crash them or put them into the canal or whatever it was. And in doing so, one of the cars that was trying to sandwich the car of the MP lost control. It was on the incoming traffic side, and it lost control and ended up in the canal after being hit, or sorry, on the side road after being hit by the truck, the oncoming truck. Luckily that the persons who were in the car that was being chased immediately went to the police and reported it and went to a police station. Otherwise, who knows whether this story and what this would have happened to this story. However, many questions are being asked. It is said this was a SOCU, Serious Organized Crime Unit, operation. Is that so? Because SOCU is a body set up under the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Act. It deals with money laundering, and it deals with financing terrorists. So is SOCU's involvement, is they saying that Brassington's a terrorist? Or his family? Furthermore, what is the GDF doing with the SOCU? In our time, GDF was not involved in operational matters with SOCU. However, of course, intelligence sharing between security agencies, that is a norm. But this is not what happened that day. Someone called that young man who somehow picked up his wife from work and ordered him to go to do what they did. And it's regrettable that a mother and two children, I believe, have lost their lives. And we're deeply grieved by that. But we also believe that the entire nation should be aggrieved and worried and concerned about the fact that this wasn't robbers that they were chasing and a robbery had taken place and they're giving chase to catch them. This was a young woman and a young man walking from the bridge into their car, trying to get out because the cars were hemming them in, thought they were robbers trying to attack them, and decided to get out of the area. And of course, that's when the chase began and ended up heading on to Carafesta, where the car was being, sandwiched, and that is when the accident took place. Why would you do this if they were investigating, pick up the people, charge them, take them before court, call them in for questioning? Why this terrible thing that led to this tragedy? And the tragedy could have gone the other way. The young people who were in the car that was being chased could have been killed too. And I wonder if that would happen if there had been any publicity on what was going on. It is the fact that the PPP and a number of the civil society leaders, including the private sector commission, are calling for an investigation in the matter. They're calling for the Brigadier Chief of Staff of the Ghana Defense Force and the Commissioner of Police to tell the public what happened and why were they trailing the children of what they thought. If it was Brassington's child, they said they had under their radar. Then why? Why do the people's children have to be involved in something that they say they're doing? Too many questions, and the point is, this development is a very sinister one. Because it precedes in addition to that, it precedes a warrant where they went and searched Nissel's office, took piles of documents in a truck, and then the police say they don't know about this. They're not sure who's got it and where are the documents. So that were they to charge people, how do you defend yourself when a lot of these documents may disappear, may be disappeared too? And so you have, in the meantime, while this is going on, the great Clive Thomas in the Kajur News talking about and giving information that they're investigating people with regards to their bank accounts and referring to actual figures in people's bank accounts. Well, let me tell you all, SARU has no legal authority. Dr. Thomas is working under no authority except a political directorate and a vendetta. He has his personal vendetta, and that is what he's operating on. And secondly, SOCU and SARU don't have connections with each other, legally or otherwise, because SOCU is doing with money laundering, asset forfeiture, etc. So if they're trying to use, SARU is trying to use SOCU to do its dirty work, SOCU better watch itself, because it will be challenged in court what is going on. But when you look at the statements of the very cautious statements by the Chief of Staff and the Commissioner of Police, and then you also look at the President's recent statement yesterday that there be no probe in what has happened, that he sees no necessity for a probe or an investigation, no need for full investigation or probe, and I think if I'm quoting him correctly, that this was not politically directed. Well, that's nice news. Well, then explain to us, who did direct it? Who did it? Was it rogue elements within the army and the police? Was it authentic persons in the police and army? Because some of us are a little bit familiar with how the security forces operate in the country. Some of us from the PPP have been ministers of Home Affairs, sat on the defense board. We're familiar. We're familiar. And therefore, when we ask some of these questions, we're not out of our league in asking them. But you know, I want to bring to your attention that Kaiju News, for example, has made it their mantra. Every single day, they're saying, why isn't the government charging and arresting these PPP people? And in fact, it is Kaiju News that is pressuring or putting pressure publicly on the APNU AFC to arrest, throw away the key, charge these people, lock them up, these terrible PPP people. And one has to ask, you know, because clearly Kaiju News seems to be the mouthpiece of APNU AFC, but it also seems to be taking on the role that is their conscience, reminding them that they promised the people they'd lock up the PPP people, and so why aren't they doing it? And so this sinister role, too, of what Kaiju News is playing mustn't be disregarded. As we've said, we're calling and demanding on the Chief of Staff and the Commissioner of Police to explain to the public what happened, why were they targeting these two young people, on what grounds. Someone said it's mistaken identity. Who knows? We weren't there. They need to tell us, because 3 people lost their lives. The truck driver going home to your wife maybe and your children for Christmas, he got killed. A woman who was a nurse who happened to be in the car for some strange reason with the soldier got killed, and the soldier got killed. The government has to tell the guy, these people, and they have to explain why was this methodology of tracking, tracing, surveillance, and targeting. And by the way, you know, it hasn't finished. It hasn't finished. As of last night, they went to another member of Parliament's house, Soku, and again this morning to another member of Parliament's house, telling them they want them to come in to Soku's office to see them on investigations to do with NISA. So it continues, and therefore we are seeing a whole issue of intimidation. Are they trying to frame people? Do they have cause? What are they doing, and why are they doing it in this way? So at least maybe there are elements that went to Mr. Irfan Ali's home, telling him they want him to come into Suku. They went to Mr. Nigel Dharamlal and told him he needs to go into there as well. And I'm sure between now and the next program, there will be more. Because we are convinced that they're targeting the People's Progressive Party and the leaders of the People's Progressive Party. And they're dealing with, focusing on young MPs, because we believe they're trying to intimidate them and their families. Well, they got a thing coming. People are not going to be intimidated whatsoever. But you know, as I close, because we have Parliament today, and I'm sorry, I'm really, 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 really sorry to have been late and was unavoidable, but I'll make it up for you next week, okay? I'll make it up for you next week so that you can have your call-in part. But because of Parliament, I just want to be able to say that you've noticed maybe that on the last sitting on December 30th, as we close the sitting in Parliament, that, you know, the normal thing is everybody wishes each other well and stuff like that. And so it's normal the Leader of the House, the Prime Minister, and the Leader of the Opposition get up and wish each other and wish the whole Parliament and the whole country a Happy New Year or whatever festival it is at that time. And so the Prime Minister seems to be incapable of living up to an occasion. He seems to always want to drag us back in the gutter, always can't lose an opportunity to put a sting in, to put a lash in. And he has to keep remembering he's now Prime Minister for all of Guyana, not for APNU AFC. And this is the problem with the whole government having. And we talked about painting of Guyana green, and the green APNU and the APNU Guyana, and the branding of our country. And we'll come back to that, because that's not over yet. That's taking place little bit by little bit wherever we go. But it's the same Prime Minister who stated in his speech that the House is made up of patriots and those who are not patriots. And when he said that, and that there were those in the House who are not patriots, he of course indicated our side of the House. However, the Prime Minister seems to have forgotten what he said, because I guess after a rousing New Year's Eve, the parties with the police and the army and whatever else the Prime Minister did, that he suddenly woke up and realized, I need to talk about national unity. And so, As I said at a press briefing, I believe that the Prime Minister has, those things you put in your phone to remind you to do things? I think they call it an app or something. So you put in your calendar in your phone and let them know you're supposed to pay this bill by this time, or you're supposed to do this or go this. So I think the Prime Minister has one on his phone that says every 2 weeks, talk about national unity, bring out the national unity thing. And so, of course, having had a rousing and rollicking New Year's Eve, he has now been reminded national unity. And so, of course, he talked that we need to have national unity, and calling on the PPP to come for national unity. Well, ladies and gentlemen, national unity is an extraordinarily serious issue, and it doesn't work like that. And where there's been a fracture of trust and confidence, a lot has to go in to reconstruct and to restore that kind of level of trust and confidence. How are we, as a party, to have trust and confidence in a government that came in with 4,500 votes, in which GCOM did not allow a recount in any democratic nation of this country, of the world, a recount that's that slim, 4,000 votes, there would have been a recount. GCOM did not allow it, and we know what's going on in GCOM. And so that was the first thing. How do we build trust and confidence? How do we build trust and confidence and want to sit down and talk of national unity in this cavalier way of the Prime Minister, when there's dismissal of thousands of people due to their ethnicity and political affiliation, and denying their rights to benefits that they would have accumulated, the assault on parliamentary democracy and the subversion of the standing orders, undermining and abandonment of the procurement laws and regulations. And we know that companies are being created, registered, deliberately in order to go for contracts, because many of the companies getting contracts now have no experience whatsoever, and they just started in 2015. So whilst we want the emergence and the expansion of the business community, we want to have more economic activity, in this particular issue we are watching a trend that shows that in fact there will be discrimination again, now using business and community in that manner. And we did talk about stifling and stymieing the 7 of the 10 RDCs that the PPP won. The role of their appointed REOs, who were candidates on their list, remember, and they have removed public servants, saying that there can't be a public servant and a candidate on the PPP list. Well, they're speaking the truth there, because they said PPP list, and therefore they have put all their people who are on the list into positions in government in the RDCs. The treatment of the RDCs, the way in which these REOs in many cases are behaving as if they're the elected officials and talking down and stymieing the capital programs and the current programs of these regions. The year has come to the end, and it'll be extraordinarily interesting when we come to budget time to see how much of the budget, take out Region 9, over $1 billion for Region 9, how much of it was implemented. And we will check on that to see, because there are many contracts as of end of November, early December, that hadn't even begun, hadn't even been advertised and awarded. So these are, again, the treatment of people in Region 9, the interior regions, because many of them voted for the PPP. Most of them voted for the PPP. So whether this is retribution and vendetta by the AP and UFC. And there are many things that happen every single day to these regional democratic councillors and the regional chairman and our councillors in the regions we won, and also in the regions we haven't won, but we're talking about the ones we won. And that, for example, I got a report from one region, the REO called in all the confidential secretaries for the regional chairman, vice chairman, and all the heads of department, and reshuffled all of them. Now, usually the rule of thumb is that the confidential secretary of the regional chairman, vice chairman, is usually shared as one person, that this is a person they trust and feel comfortable with. The RA just decides, wakes up on January the 4th, summons a meeting, and tells everybody, move around. Takes district education officers in interior areas, orders them out of their area, have them sitting in Lethem, for example, for 3 days. They can't go home and get their clothes, and then ordering them to stay in Lethem. They can't go back to their areas. This type of treatment of people stinks to high heaven. And we as Guyanese have to be able to say, no, we're not going back to the days of the 60s, 70s, 80s. We're not going back to the period of where we had to struggle for all these issues all over again. We're not going to. We're wiser. We've gone through a period of building of democracy, restoring democracy. We as a people have breathed fresh air in terms of the changes over the last 2 decades. You can criticize us. We may not have done everything right. That's fine. That's okay. That's part of democracy. But we must say that this type of developments, the disregard for the sugar and the rice sectors and the thousands of farmers and workers of this country and their families, removal of social programs to help the poor, shameless salary increases for themselves, including traveling allowances. And in this context, this is where the Prime Minister suddenly decides to remember, having called us unpatriotic, having called us all sorts of names in Parliament, which I won't repeat on television, by the way. But if you look very carefully when we have the debate and the camera switches to the Prime Minister, you might be able to lip sync and see what he's saying about us, because we hear it all the time. But anyway, we have not been obstructionists. We have produced a 9-point plan to save the rice sector, send it to the Minister of Agriculture. We publicized it. We gave a 26-point for the proposal to save our nation, the economy, to save our democracy, to preserve our democracy. Is that all been ignored? We have made proposals on the mining sector in relation to the restoration of programs that were cut, such as the We Care program for the school children, for example, as well as we're opposed to but want to have the school uniform voucher allowances that were done in the interior that created economic activity for those communities. Not handing out shoes that they're getting as donations from all sorts of people as part of their campaign arrangements and campaign finance arrangements. So anyway, a long talk, and as I said, it's lovely to be back and to see you in the new year, and I promise you, next program, I will give you more time so you can call in. I just wanted to wrap up quickly and to give you an idea what's happening, matters of public importance, and things and trends that we need to be concerned about. There are sinister moves, and we need to be vigilant, and we need to be able to say, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's letters to the media, whether it's on call-in programs, that this kind of creeping authoritarianism is extraordinarily dangerous for this country, and that I hate and dread to even think about or to even say the fact that if these trends continue, that we're heading towards a police state. And therefore, the only way we can deal with this is that we must not be cowed. We must be able to support what's good, positive, and we must be able to show that we have the answers to help the country and to even help the government in some cases, but we will not tolerate this type of creeping authoritarianism that is hurting this nation and stifling us in terms of our expansion and development. So, have a blessed week. See you next week, and I promise that with Parliament, if there is Parliament next week, I'll adjust the time with the support, of course, of the staff at CNS Channel to see if I can come on a little bit earlier so that we won't be having such a gallop as I feel I've done 100 miles right now. All the best to you. Have a great week, and thank you so much for listening to Matters of Public Importance. Ta-ta.